What's going on, guys? It is the Coaster Battleman here, bringing you my opinion on several different roller coaster restraints. I know on every roller coaster there's some sort of restraint system, about 99% of the time. And these are some of the major roller coaster manufacturers, and these are going to be the restraints that I'm going to be talking about. First, we're going to talk about B&M. They have several restraints: the traditional over-the-shoulder restraints, the clamshells, the vest restraints, along with the stand-up coaster and the flying coaster restraints. The stand-ups are pretty wonky, they're pretty weird. The flying coasters are actually pretty solid restraints. They're pretty comfortable, they're big, they're fairly bulky, but they aren't as bad as the Vekoma Flying Dutchman restraints, which I'm going to get to those later. Those are pretty big restraints. But for B&M, my favorite restraints from them are the clamshells by far. They're excellent, they're very comfortable, and they work so well with their hypercoasters, and it's pretty easy not to get stapled when having those restraints on the coaster. And the classic B&M over-the-shoulder restraints, even though you will get head banging, there's always that possibility, the B&M coasters are just so smooth that you don't really need to change the restraints from an over the shoulder to a vest restraint, and they're pretty decent restraints. They get the job done. They're pretty decent overall. And then the vest restraints I don't like as much as the traditional over the shoulder restraints, because especially for the dive coasters and the inverted coasters, this is because they're not really as comfortable, and as the ride continues, the restraint tightens your thighs, and it's just really annoying. And they have B&M has kind of perfected the system. Is on X-Flight, the vests, you can't really stretch them outward, and they just stay locked in one spot, and it's really annoying. While on Gatekeeper, Thunderbird, Banshee, Valraven, you can at least stretch the vest a little bit, even though it's a little bit harder to do, but at least it's better than the X-Flight restraints. So they have improved the design, but it's still not the greatest. Next is Aerodynamics. They're no longer in operation, but they have probably the most average restraint systems. They have basic over-the-shoulder restraints for their looping coasters and suspended coasters, and then the basic lap bars for mine trains and hyper coasters. Overall, they're just okay. The hypercoaster Magnum XL200, the lap bars on there are very similar to rides like Gemini, Thunder Ration, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, etc., that are mine trains or those special coasters. And they're pretty okay. They aren't too bad, but I prefer the lap bars over the shoulder restraints. Next, for Intamin, we have the T-bar restraints. Intamin, the T-bar restraints are easily my favorite restraints. The only one that isn't quite, that's at its level, is the clamshells. The B&M clamshells are a close second for me, but the Intamin T-bars, they're so small, they're so open, and you can get tons of great airtime on the coasters that feature it. And on Millennium Force, these are excellent restraints. Top Thrill Dragster, it makes the launch a heck of a lot better. And overall, these T-bars are easily the greatest restraints ever created. They're so simple, yet they're so good, and they're really comfortable. But unfortunately, I can't say the same with their other restraints like Maverick and Intimidator 305. These over-the-shoulder / lap bar kind of restraints, you have a bit of a collared restraint, and they aren't really the greatest. I mean, they are okay for getting airtime because it has a bit of that lap bar style to it, but it crushes your thighs especially if you're stapled. And the older, harder restraints were awful for neck banging, head banging if you were a smaller rider, neck banging for larger riders. It's just not really the greatest setup. Next, we have PTC. I'm not a fan of the PTC trains, especially on rides like Voyage, where it could be a much smoother ride if it had like GCI trains, gravity group trains. But Unfortunately, with these trains, they just aren't the greatest, and they're pretty tight little trains. The lap bars aren't really the greatest, and when they're stapled down on you, it's really hard to get a smoother ride on a lot of these wooden coasters with this system, with the exception of a few, but overall, not really the greatest. They're pretty mediocre at best. Next, we have SNS Worldwide. They have some really cool restraints on their 4D Free Flies, these super comfortable vest restraints. They're excellent. I really like them a lot. And then also on some of their larger coasters in recent years in Max Force and Steel Curtain, they have these modern lap bars that are a much better style of lap bar and leg restraints compared to the RMC trains. The RMC ones I'm not a fan of RMC's restraint system. They're just okay. While the SNS version, it's a lot thinner of a design. They aren't as hard and big and bulky. They're a lot better. Next, we have Premier Rides. I'm not a big Premier Rides restraint fan. Their lap bars over the years have not really been the greatest, and their modern Skyrocket 2s at the Busch Gardens and SeaWorld parks, they have some terrible, terrible restraints. And I'm not a fan of those comfort collars. They're really stupid and pointless. The lap bar is enough for that train. And for Vekoma, they also have mediocre restraints. The SLC and the Invertigo, they're kind of like the B&M restraints. They're fine, but you have these extra pads that are so close to your ears. They're literally like inches, or not even inches, like millimeters away from your ears. And it's really annoying, especially on the SLCs, if you don't keep your head on the left side or the right side of the restraint and keep it there, which is a strategy I used ages ago in Michigan's Adventure. And also, the flying coaster restraints are pretty mediocre as well. I'm not really a fan. They're super big, bulky, and really annoying. I mean, they get the job done, but they're not nearly as good as the B&M flying coaster system. So yeah, those were some restraints. These are my thoughts on several roller coaster manufacturers and their restraint system. Overall, I think the B&M clamshell and the Intamin T-bars are the two best, with the Intamin T-bars being the best by far. The clamshell is a close second. And then after that, I would probably say the Aerodynamics lap bars and the B&M over-the-shoulder restraints are probably my next two favorites after that. But after those top two, it's honestly a toss-up. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. These were my thoughts on certain roller coaster restraints, and stay tuned for more videos.